There's an issue with social media that I've been thinking about quite a bit recently, and the reason for that is just noticing the kinds of interactions that I get on social media. And I'm sure you've had this experience yourself if you spend especially time on Twitter, where you will make some kind of statement or make some kind of claim or comment on something, and then you get a barrage of responses that start attacking. And when you read those attacks, you start thinking, well, this has absolutely nothing to do with what I was talking about. Clearly, they have read whatever I've said in some other kind of context. I've seen this where your Twitter circles have a set kinds of ideas and talking points that if your tweet sometimes goes out of those circles and people have other ideas and talking points, people can completely misunderstand what is being said. So in light of that, I've been thinking a bit about specifically what this means about the human person and the human person being isolated and depersonalized. And I mean this in two different senses. So in the one sense, there is the kind of obvious depersonalization of people on the internet, which is that you don't see someone face to face, and when you read the words that somebody says on some social media platform, you really see just an idea or words. And even though, sure, there is this kind of intellectual understanding that there was a human being behind that, you do not have the same kind of, psychological response when reading an idea from somebody as you would if you were talking to that person face to face. And so there is this kind of divorce in your head, whereas you know that there's a person behind what's being said, but you don't really connect to that emotionally. So it is very easy to start attacking people as if what you're really doing is just critiquing an idea. So there is this kind of depersonalization in that sense, where you are divorcing people's ideas or words from actual people themselves. And there is then a second kind of depersonalization that I see on social media, and that is really a delocalization. What I mean by that is social media has given us the ability to cross boundaries when we are communicating. And that may sound good, and in some ways, of course, that is good. There is value in being able to communicate with somebody from across the world who you may never have encountered in another context. But the problem with this is that when you divorce people and you divorce people's ideas or language or rhetoric or questions or whatever it might be from their particular local context, the place in which they live, the questions that are being asked in their community, their jobs, whatever it might be, you really cannot understand what people are talking about a lot of the time. And so this is a problem that I see regularly, and I've just noticed this in looking at the geographical areas that people are from who comment either positively or negatively on my tweets especially, but not even just positively and negatively. I'm thinking even more broadly, the people who seem to understand what I'm saying and the people who don't seem to understand what I'm saying. Now, there are probably multitudinous factors in that, but I have noticed certain geographical boundaries there, and I've noticed some maybe socioeconomic boundaries there as well. And I don't think that's incidental, and I don't think it's something like a lack of education among certain people or something. I'm not making that claim at all. But I think it's just difference in context, because if we live in different contexts and different locations, we see the world rather differently. This is even true in the United States. And those who have moved from one part of the United States to another have seen this. And now, what I don't mean by that is you move from one of these more international metropolitan areas to another international metropolitan area. So you can move from, say, New York City to Chicago, and you're certainly going to see regional differences to some extent, but you're not going to see what are kind of local customs in the same way, or local rituals and ways of thinking and ways of living, because the way of living between those who live in Chicago and those who live in New York City, well, certainly there are some differences. The pizza's different, and there's a little bit of a different accent in Chicago and New York City, but they're not fundamentally different in the same way that you see if you are going from, say, New York City, and then you, I don't know, go out to rural Montana. A very different world, a very different way of thinking, a very different set of questions and problems that people have. And so what that means is that even if people agree from those two areas fundamentally on some of their primary values, if you see the way that they speak or language that they use or things that they're saying disconnected from one another, disconnected from the people, then they may seem contradictory. People that would probably agree with one another actually seem like they don't when it comes to social media. And that's because they're reading things in a different context and they are speaking in a different context. And this is a problem that has really been, it's a challenge that we have faced, yes, with globalization, but even prior to that with the Enlightenment. And with the Enlightenment, with someone like an Immanuel Kant, or John Locke, and to different extents, but there has been this idea that there is some kind of accessible rationality that all people have. And it's kind of universal, and it's something objective, that we have this ability to separate our persons from our circumstances or separate ourselves from our fundamental presuppositions. And Locke talks about the mind as kind of a blank slate that has these impressions imprinted on it, or through sense impression as we start to understand the world around us. And of course, those are still, locally shaped, certainly. But this idea of some kind of universal humanity that has this kind of abstracted rationality that we can just access, that therefore creates this kind of universal communication across cultural boundaries and barriers, it's just not a reality that I think is working. And social media in some ways is just an experiment in this. Can we just separate ourselves from our contexts and even ourselves as persons, and then just throw out ideas and throw out concepts, and then all interact as rational beings trying to just have an intellectual discourse about this or that? It's clearly has not happened at all. It's really, Twitter itself especially is not a great place for intellectual discourse. Now, you may say to that in response, okay, well, in the past, there have certainly been books that are written in one country and then they go somewhere else and they apply in that context as well. So why is it that someone like Immanuel Kant, he's living in Germany, but his ideas are prominent all throughout Europe? Well, there's a difference between looking at a text that is lengthy. It has a context. You look at that and you can actually look at the development of somebody's ideas and then start to think through them and apply them. And I think it's that necessary context that we are missing when it comes to something like Twitter. And so if I publish a book and people from different places that all understand the language that I'm speaking, or say it's translated into another language, read one of my books, they will hopefully have a better understanding of what I'm trying to say than they would if I just see an isolated statement on something like Twitter. So I think that the rise of social media has all sorts of problems with it. But this is one that I really don't see talked about a lot, is this kind of delocalization. And it's something that I think we all need to consider as we interact with people on social media platforms, is ask the question, okay, what is their context? And what issues are they facing? What challenges do they see? Because if we have one particular challenge in, say, our local community, and another community has a challenge perhaps in the opposite direction, right? So you've gone to kind of one extreme problem in this area, and then you have a problem that's kind of in the other extreme in this area. When the person over here responds to what is this extreme in this area where they live, this person says, oh, you're on the side of these extremists in my area, when actually, they may actually totally agree because they haven't actually been able to sit and have a conversation about what they're responding to, what your thought process is, what your presuppositions are. So I don't really know if there's a answer that I'm looking for here or a solution to this, but I do think it is an important component of the discussions that we have across social media platforms. And it's something for us to consider as we do interact with other people on these platforms. And it does, among many other things, raise the question of whether these kind of platforms really do add in any way to the flourishing of human life, or whether this kind of depersonalization and delocalization, dehumanization that occurs through social media is perhaps something that humanity should decide to get rid of. As much as maybe we don't want that, it probably would be beneficial for us. So anyway, I hope you like this, and make sure you do like, comment, subscribe. And to be clear, social media, I'm talking about these kind of platforms, not YouTube. I think YouTube is overall very good because you do have the long form content. I'm talking podcasts, YouTube. This gives people a chance to speak, but it gives people a chance to speak in a way that they actually have. First of all, you're seeing a face, which is important with YouTube, but it also gives you the time to actually develop an idea and develop your thoughts well enough that there's always going to be misunderstanding, but not to the same extent. All right, we'll see you in the next one. God bless.